Hi class, how you doing? This is Steve again, and we're going to cover a little bit of Chapter 4 in this short video. Chapter 4 deals with a question that I think we all struggle with it sometimes. Is there an ultimate reality or not? This last chapter we talked about different ways to view reality, um, but now we're going to talk about, is there an ultimate reality? And so much of this comes down to the bottom line of what you believe about God. As the writer points out, there are really three options. There is a God, there is no God, or it can't really be known whether there's a God or not. And these are called, and this will show up on your quiz, um, if there is a God, then that phrase, that term is theism, Theism, meaning God. Atheism, with the A making it negative or not, means no God. And agnosticism, which many of you have heard of that, some of you may claim to be an agnostic, what that means is you really don't know. The word gnosis comes from the Greek, which means knowledge or mind, and with the A prefix, it means without. So it's like not knowing, not being able to know, not saying there is a God or there's not a God. So believing in what you believe will dictate a great deal as to how you view whether there's a reality or not. Because what happens in your belief system is not only do you deal with what is here, but if you believe there is a God, um, then you will believe that there's another reality after you die. So that becomes a reality as well. I think it was Pascal, I think it's mentioned in this book about Pascal's wager, which is really interesting. He basically was arguing that, do you roll the dice and say, okay, I don't believe in God, but just in case there is, then I'll live a certain way. So, the idea behind, really actually behind just about everything that you do or believe, really hinges a great deal on what you believe about God. Now, I really want to cover just really three main things in this book, because I think the rest of it's fairly straightforward. I don't think you'll be struggling with many of the other ideas. But it's the three different arguments about existence, about the beginning of all that is. The first one is ontological, and it's most related to a priest named Anselm, A-N-S-E-L-M. The ontological argument is really pretty straightforward. It says that since you can imagine there's a God and no one greater than a God, than the God, then God must exist. In other words, if your mind is capable of envisioning one who is greater than anything else and there's no one greater, then that proves that there is a God, because your mind is able to conceive it. If your mind were not able to conceive it, then there very well may not be a God. Or if your mind is can continually think of someone or something greater than God, then that becomes the God. In other words, it's like in math when you have infinity. You go 1, 2, 3, and all the way up to the sideways 8 sign, which means infinity. And so that in numbers, there's always one more. Well, in the ontological argument, it says we can't conceive of one more. That once we get to a point, then that's the point. And because we can conceive that point, that there is none greater than God, then God exists. A second argument is cosmologically. Cosmologically is one that you hear pretty frequently in today's world especially, and it's the notion of that every action had to have a beginning action to cause it to go into motion. So imagine a line of dominoes, and in that line of dominoes, you've laid out, say, thousands and thousands. Well, as you move the first one, it hits the second one, which hits the third one, all the way to the very end. So there had to be something that started the first one. In the case of mine, it would be me hitting the domino to begin hitting the first domino. So the cosmological argument says, look, the universe is in motion, humanity is in motion, the world is in motion. Cosmos, which can mean the universe, can mean everything that is. So everything that is in motion. But the question becomes, who set that in motion? What set that in motion? Some will argue for the position that there was a Big Bang, and that in that Big Bang, then everything came to be. One thing initiated another. My question with that has always been, well, what was it that was the Big Bang? There had to have been something for the Big Bang to have banged on, if that makes sense. There had to be something to begin. You can't have a Big Bang and there's nothing there. There had to be something that initiated the Big Bang Theory. So a Big Bang Theory even works in some regards, if one wants to argue it this way, in a God model as well, because one could argue that God is the one that started the Big Bang Theory. But regardless of what you believe, the idea behind the cosmological is essentially that something had to start that at the very beginning. And who better to start it than God? And then there's one more major argument, and that is the teleological. Tele comes from the word that means, it can mean paid, it can mean end, it can mean reconciled, it can mean finished. It's got those kinds of words in Greek, or those kinds of senses about it. The teleological argument is very interesting, and it really basically comes down to a design model of God. And it says, okay, imagine you were to go to the moon, and on the moon you get out of your spacesuit, or out of the spaceship, and in your spacesuit, and you're walking around, and let's say you find a iPhone. Now you could say one of two things at that point. You could say, somebody must have lost their iPhone here. Well, since you know who's been on the planet, and iPhones had not been created the last time someone landed there, then you could say, maybe this happened by chance. Maybe evolution and conditioning and all of these different things caused this iPhone to eventually piece together so that it's called an iPhone. Well, a teleological argument says no, that can't be, that there had to be an intelligent design behind that which is. So think of it this way. Think about your own body and the way your body functions. It's very complex, very complicated if you think about it. I mean, the blood runs a certain way, the heart functions in such a way to serve as the pumping agent for the blood, the lungs breathe in air. It's interesting that plants put off oxygen, which we breathe, and the world is covered with plants and trees and things. So it's a very complex machinery, and when something breaks on us, it could be very complex to fix. Well, the teleological argument says, look, we didn't just come into being because we're too complex, we're too complicated. There had to be a design to us, or we could not have been. In other words, we could not have randomly become human beings. That's not, according to a teleological argument, that's not possible. We had to have been designed. There was an end in mind in the creation of us. So those are the three major ones: the ontological, the cosmological, and the teleological. The rest of this chapter really, I think, is it speaks a little bit about some of the other belief systems, a little bit about Hinduism, some Islamic type thoughts. But all in all, the rest of this is pretty straightforward, and I don't think I need to go into this as much. But I hope, hopefully, those three arguments, because in the philosophy of religion course I teach, we spend a great deal on all three of those, and those can be, the way I summarized it was pretty straightforward, but they can be complicated as you go further into each of the arguments. But those are it in a nutshell. So those are three things I think you can take away from it. Um, Teleological says that there had to be an intelligent design behind it. Um, Ontological said that because we can conceive of a God and no one greater, then he exists. And the cosmological says that there had to be something that initiated the very beginning. So hopefully all of that helped, and I hope you have a really good week, and we'll talk to you soon.